Welcome to a new series I'm doing, which I'm calling Walk and Talks, which will be me going out into the community with somebody who helps contribute to the great community we've got across Bexley and Bromley. And I'll be talking to them about what got them involved in the community, what inspires them, and find out. But the main aim here is to really celebrate the wonderful people we have living across Bexley and Bromley. And to start off, I've asked my good friend and ward colleague, Councillor Josh Coldspring-White, to come and do the first one. So thank you, Josh,
Thank you
for coming
for having
on.
me. It's really great to kick off this series here in Wellwood in our ward of Hayes and Coney Hall, which is a lovely, lovely green space.
It is. I mean, I'm as both a councillor and as a London Assembly member, I've got this great platform and I want to use it to celebrate our community. But the reason I've kicked off with Josh is because, Josh, you are the youngest councillor on Bromley Council, elected at 23.
Absolutely.
And it was absolutely great working with you during that by-election. It was a very sad by-election with the loss of Councillor Andrew Lee. Before you, but it was fantastic to get you on the council, so thank you very much for coming here to celebrate. Now, we've mentioned you're the youngest councillor in Bromley, so dare I ask you what age you first became interested?
Well, if
in
you
politics?
ask my mum, she'd say the age of 8. When, 8. When Boris was first elected. But I think a lot of that was more. I was very interested in the news. Obviously, the credit crunch was going on then. Barack Obama was elected around that time, so there was a lot going on. And as a horrendously nerdy and geeky child, obviously that's what gravitated. But I think probably where the interest really sparked off was probably coming into being a teenager. You know, I grew up in a single parent family. You grow up early in that situation, and I think because of that you think a lot more about the world around you and crucially what can you do to change it. For me, that was joining the Conservative Party because those values of opportunity and aspiration, but also of being responsible, really appealed to me. So it kind of went off on there. I studied it for A-level. I went to Warwick University and studied politics and sociology, and somehow through all of that found myself back here in Bromley representing, you know, the best ward in the borough.
So talk me through the process. Yeah, when did you realise you wanted to actually? You say you studied politics. I know you stood in Penge and Cater ward in the 2022 elections. When did you decide? Do you know what? I want to be in public office. I want to be part of that decision-making process.
I think that was probably when I was a teenager, because once you start looking at how politics works, obviously then that was during the Brexit years and everything, so there was a lot going on then to think about. And I guess I just thought to myself, you know, those of us, I think, who are confident enough and feel able to stand up for people, you know, vulnerable people, we have a responsibility to dedicate our lives to public service and to do that. And so I guess kind of from that starting point, you then start to get interested in the policy. And, you know, I think having lived here all my life locally, it was something I really wanted to do to kind of give back to the community that I grew up in. You mentioned I stood first in Penge. That's quite normal to stand, you know, in a different seat to kind of see the ropes, find out how it all works, and then, as you say, you know, 2 years later, quite unexpectedly after Andrew passed, you know, I was offered the opportunity to come and stand here. You know, this is the place where I went to primary school, secondary school. Most of my friends live locally, my family lives locally, so the opportunity to kind of come and do some real good, but also to kind of, you know, look at the role of what being a councillor is, and try and do something new with it, was an opportunity you couldn't really pass up on, and it's been absolutely fantastic. Best job in the world.
So I remember when I was first elected, when I was in my 30s, I stood numerous times, didn't get elected throughout my 20s. But when I first got elected, I thought I was quite a competent public speaker. Friends and things had always said they thought I was quite a good public speaking, it's kind of like that meme of how I see myself and what I actually am, has made me realise that maybe I need to do some more public speaking training, and maybe my skills weren't quite where I thought they was. But the thing that really took me by surprise was when I first spoke in the council chamber.
Yeah.
Because I was really used to talking from a room like fellow Conservative in the room, or talking to people you at least knew. And the thing about politics that no one really warns you about is when you stand up to speak in the council chamber, half of the room are your political opponents.
Yeah.
You know, their job's to get you out at the next election.
Yeah.
And I found that to be one of the most challenging things about actually adapting to elected life. What's some of the biggest challenges you've had?
I think a really big challenge is, say, I live locally. This is where I grew up. So going into the pub, people kind of spin their heads around and know who you are because they've seen you posting on Facebook.
Well, yes, we got spotted in Costume World Park the other week. That
we did.
Was very bizarre.
That's a weird experience. I think probably you don't get lots of formal training, right? So you're kind of thrown into the deep end. And that's like, I had an interest in policy and study the politics degree, but that's a lot of it's in the abstract, and you're suddenly thrown into really detailed decisions about whether it be about schools or whether it be about adult social care or parks or what have you, really important things that people need in order to live good decent lives, and you're suddenly given the power to decide those things. And you're right, being 23 when that happens, it's very much like, am I qualified to do this? Obviously, it's not so much about that. You put yourself forward for election, and if the good people of Hayes and Coney, as they did, decide to elect you, then you do have to. But kind of getting around that, finding your feet and thinking, actually, I'm here to speak on behalf of my residents, who are good, decent, hard-working people. And I've got to be here to stand up for them. When you remind yourself of that and you begin to see the ropes and know what's going on, then it's much easier. I'd say that was definitely.
What's the biggest life lesson you've had on the council then?
The biggest life lesson, wow. I think it's about you've got to be responsible. As elected officials, we have to take responsible decisions. They might not always be immediately popular decisions, but if they're the right decision, then it's worth doing. And you're not necessarily going to get thanks for some of the things, but if it's the right thing to do by people, then it's worth doing.
So, what's your biggest win on the council?
Well, we're going to be coming up to it fairly soon. I have pride.
We'll talk about the head when we get there. Then. Our great head. I was kind of hoping you'd come up with something else. So 2008, you say, is when your mum says your interest peaked at an outrageously young age. I thought I was weird around 14, 15, but so 2008, I think, as you say, Boris Johnson gets elected mayor of London and whatnot, and as you say, he's a well-known personality at the time. Later in the year, we see Obama become president, which, again, you rightly or wrongly, actually was a very exciting moment. I was at sixth form at the time when it happened. Actually, I remember going into sixth form the morning after, hearing a conversation between two people in the year above me, and one of these girls goes, "Oh, could you ever imagine us having like a British Obama or any excitement in politics around then?" And actually, what's been quite weird is with things like Brexit and with obviously Boris then going on to become Prime Minister, I feel like they ended up did bring some quite, even to his credit, even though I completely disagree with the policies, see, Jeremy Corbyn was very exciting for younger people in politics. So I suppose the question here is I grew up in the 90s, obviously quite a stable period, and then when I got into adulthood, we get the credit crunch and whatnot. Whereas your generation, the generation behind me, you got the credit crunch while you were still in your early years. Obviously, it's had knocking effects to the economy still to this day. A lot, my generation now getting into its 30s, we're talking about not being able to get the housing ladder. It's all as a direct result of the credit crunch. Do you think the life experiences of your generation, the fact you had it
Yeah.
a bit tougher,
Yeah.
has actually made your generation more politically engaged, more politically active, or do you think it's had the opposite effect and made them more cynical?
I'd probably go the latter, to be honest with you. Not cynical, I think more. If you look around today, and you look around at what's happening with people my age, there's a lot of anxieties, you know, there are not as many all the time.
Yeah.
Good, well-paying jobs, we can't afford to buy a house, you know, life is more expensive, and, you know, we live in a world that's so uncertain. And I think that's probably what younger people would think about politics, is it all just feels so almost hopeless. But I think the whole point, and why I feel so passionate about doing what I do, is to try and show people, even on this very kind of small scale level, and you know, I see about 14,000 people, is there are politicians who do want to do the hope stuff, who are in it for the right reasons, you know, who do want to do the right things, do the hard graft to make sure that.
You are an unbearably optimistic person.
I am an unbearably optimistic person. I think that's a lot of where it comes from, is, you know, we need to give people a reason to believe in the political process, even at this local level. Funnily enough, this is one of the things
so
like giving people hope that we're walking past right now.
Our hedge, we will talk about the hedge.
We'll talk about the hedge.
The bigger question is, you and I, we're both Conservatives. Yes. We don't make any secret or apology about that.
No, absolutely not.
But is it exactly the
stereotypical?
Well, no, I was going to say it's not a secret that right now our party is not appealing to enough young people, and that's something that we have got to change, something we've got to do better. Yeah. So, you being elected obviously is a good way of showing there are young people in the Conservative Party. But what do you think needs to be done? What's your plan for Conservative? What is your plan to get the Conservatives to appeal to young people?
I think it is grounded in that, in a time that feels so uncertain, you know, and a world that feels so uncertain, and with an economy that seems to constantly change and shift, we need to make sure that there is a plan in place to give people a sense of stability and security and peace of mind. And that means that we have to think big about, you know, how does the economy work? You know, how do we make sure there are the jobs of the future? You know, how can we make sure that government's more accessible? How can we make sure that we're taking advantage of all the technological advancements that have happened in the last 5 or 10 years, and make sure that that is a foundation for an economy where people can afford to live in a good, stable job and buy a home, and they can have hope and aspiration for their kids as well, you know, because for too many people of your age and older, they're having kids and thinking they're going to have a worse life expectancy, a worse quality of life than me. And we need to make sure we're at the very centre against a Labour government which is quite frankly tone deaf, against Liberal Democrats who are going to do what Labour says, against Reform who don't have the answers because they don't have the expertise and the competence to deliver it. We need to be saying that we are here focused on the future with an optimistic vision that can be combined.
Well, we're at the hedge. You're dying to talk about it.
I am dying to talk about the hedge.
Yes, this lovely hedge on Coney Hall recreation ground that we managed to get installed last year. Coney, tell us about what you describe as your biggest win.
I can't really claim credit for this because, of course, you and I both did this one together, and I'm very lucky. And if you're able to go into politics, one of the joys is if you manage to find good war colleagues who you can join with and be in the trenches with, and manage to get stuff done like that. You know, locally we've had a lot of issues with illegal encampments. Say growing up around here, you know, I went to primary school just down the road. You know, this was a big problem and people feel quite aggrieved about it. And so when this came up last summer, I think I called you about 5 minutes after I saw the post on Facebook, and we said we're going to come down here and have a look. And then the following day we both kind of said we need to do something. We need to, I guess it comes back to this thing about why should people have hope in politics, because the two of us, we hope, can show people that we're there to listen and we're there to act on people's concerns. And although that hedge has got a little bit of time to grow, I would like to think that that sends a clear signal to people here in Coney Hall, and indeed across the ward, that when there are long-term issues that might not have been tackled for whatever reason in the past, that we will tackle them, and we will make sure that, you know, we're getting to grips with a lot of these problems. You know, where as both of us have done in this job, we're both very much, we want to be in the community, on the ground, local councillors. I guess coming back to kind of what we were talking about just a second ago, you know, at a time when we seem to be moving towards a more multi-party system where the polling chops and changes, to do this job in the 21st century, you have to do that. You have to do that to make sure you get re-elected. You have to give people reasons to vote for you. And so us doing things like this, and the myriad of other projects that I'm not going to bore you with today, because you already know about, and I'm sure your listeners don't want to just hear completely about Hayes and Coney Hall, but the myriad of other projects we've got going on is our way of saying we're here, we're listening, we're learning, and we're delivering for you and for your family and for this community, which we all really love.
So, because you're not just a ward councillor representing the beautiful Hayes and Coney Hall ward, but which of course includes the marvellous Keston Village.
Absolutely.
But you are also now, you're the vice chairman of the Renewal, Recreation and Housing Committee on the council, which to people that don't speak political nerd is local economy, housing and leisure. So how have you found that, and what do you think your impact has been on the council wider across the whole borough?
I mean, I've absolutely loved it. I mean, it's such a huge portfolio of different things that tackle a lot of really fundamental challenges that face this area. You know, we live in the Garden of London, in a place where the green belt is a real part of our identity. Talking about what's going on with the national policy planning framework and where to build houses, that strategic overlook on that comes to RRH, and so it's really interesting to be at the forefront of that and hear a bit more about the detail on that. But also some other, you know, topics that you wouldn't necessarily think would come through a local council, like the nightlife economy. You know, as someone who regularly goes out and enjoys our nightlife in Bromley Town Centre or Beckenham Town Centre, because it's cheaper and because, you know, it's fun to stay closer to home, to support local business. It's been really interesting. We're getting the nightlife economy survey in a couple of months' time. It's been really interesting to look into that issue, and to make sure that, you know, we're giving local people here, people of my age, a reason to stay around in Bromley, because it's such a fundamental thing to be able to go out with your mates to a pub or to a club and have a couple of drinks and have a bit of a dance. You know, it's quite a nice thing to have.
One of the interesting things was, because of course I sat on Renewal, Recreation and Housing in the previous council year, but one of the things I found really fascinating is that despite the financial challenges Bromley's facing, and, you know, getting one of the smallest grants, and whatnot, despite all that, actually, we're one of the few councils, if not the only council in London, that's actually renovating our leisure centres instead of shutting them down. And that's all come through the Renewal, Recreation and Housing policy. We've got the new library opening in West Wickham, we've got the leisure centre.
Beckenham Libraries reopening after
Beckenham
renovation
Libraries
works next week.
Exactly. It's some really exciting stuff. But it's also on the local economy, because as you say, as Bill Kingston said, it's the economy.
Stupid,
and it, I mean, how have you found, especially, you know, not patronising about that, but I think a lot of people, sometimes when they see when we put up a young candidate like yourself, I think the public reacts in two ways. There's the kind of the more cynical of, what's their experience in life, whereas of course young people have a unique experience that they've got the experience in next generation. It's very important to have that broad range. People do sometimes take against it, and then you get the people who are really excited about the fact that they're going to bring that life experience to the council. So, as someone who kind of came onto Renewal, Recreation and Housing at an early time in your own career, how have you found the local economy side?
I mean, you're right. You know, at the moment in local government overall, there's a very difficult story of budgets being underfunded, and in Bromley specifically of that grant, not, you know, us not getting the amount of money that, you know, we need to deliver the services that our residents deserve. But there are some really exciting things going on, you know, and whether it's talking about trying to make sure businesses in Bromley are getting, you know, the shout out from the council, the coordination from the council to give people jobs here in the borough, so they don't have to go and just work up in central London. You know, whether it is renovating our libraries, you know, Bromley has, I think, the highest amount of readers in our libraries in the whole of Greater London.
Yeah.
That's a really important thing, especially when we think about the amount of outstanding schools we
Well,
have.
of course, one of
protecting
the points we're just coming up to here, which will be on camera in a moment, is of course through the environment portfolio, rather, through the council Jubilee Parks Fund, that was the £1 million investment in our parks to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee. We have a great local community here in Coney Hall that completely transformed the old tennis courts. The Lawn Tennis Association have renovated the remaining tennis courts, but we've got to learn to ride, we've got table tennis. One of the things I find most rewarding as a councillor is actually engaging in the local community, and actually being a part of this kind of thing.
That's the thing, isn't it? Is that I think some people, cynical people who are interested in just climbing to the top really quickly, will probably say, oh, well, being a councillor is the first rung in the ladder and it's nowhere near as interesting as being up in Westminster. Actually, the benefit of being a councillor and the reason why it's so rewarding, which I don't think you do get as a member of parliament or a cabinet minister, is that you're on the front line delivering for your residents. You're out there on the doors speaking to them. You're there getting the emails. You're using the local facilities, and you're able to bring people together and deliver things like this and the hedge we just spoke about. And there's lots of other things across the ward in Hayes and Keston Village as well. So that's a massive, massive privilege. But then also, you know, the benefit of being on those committees is having a look at it. You know, Bromley is a borough of 300,000 people. It's about, you know, the same size as most cities outside of Greater London. To be able to look at being ambitious to deliver those public services for people, because we're really lucky in Bromley that, you know, we have good public services alongside prudent financial management, and to help contribute to that.
So I think being a councillor for me is all about the difference you can make in the community. And we spoke about some of the projects we've supported locally. So tell me about the policy area that gets Josh out of bed in the morning.
Probably education. Education is, you know, I think one of the things we can look at from the last Conservative government is what good education was. You know, academies, free schools, focusing on standards, making sure people have the option to go and do technical training as well. Coming back to when we were talking about, you know, the economy of the future is based in technical skills. That's how you get those good, well-paying jobs. So that's really important. And what we're seeing now under this Labour government is an all-out assault on standards, on academisation, on that legacy, cross-party legacy actually, because New Labour did a lot of this, and we kind of made it better when we came into government. You know, that assault on education in Bromley, as I say, we have loads of outstanding schools, really good schools, a good mix of independent and comprehensive. You know, we're really lucky here, so that someone like me from a single parent family, who if I was brought up somewhere else might have not gone down the path I had, you know, I was able to go to a good comprehensive school, and that alongside, you know, having a fantastic family around me, you know, was able to come and do this and have ambitions to, you know, do this job in the first place, which is quite something. So I think looking at that and how we can conserve that and giving people those opportunities, there's nothing more important, and there's nothing really more conservative, I can think, than making sure people have those opportunities to do what they want with their life.
That's right. You've lived in the borough all your life. We spoke a lot about that during your by-election about the school.
Yeah, we did.
We called you the local lad, and we both kind of lost a bit of respect for me. And when I wrote it in your
leaflet,
brilliant,
though.
But you know, you can't beat a bit of alliteration.
No, it's true.
But no, what's your favourite part of Bromley then?
Oh, what do you mean?
Why? If you were selling Bromley, what would the thing you told? If you said, "Oh, you've got to come live in Bromley, you've got to see this."
I mean, I would say all of it, but that's probably a bit of a cop-out, really, isn't it?
Horribly cop-out.
Bromley is a lovely place to live because it has that unique mix of...
It's not my time to give you an answer.
Where's my... Probably Beckenham. I love my... Actually, no.
What about Beckenham? Tell me about
the nightlife. We were speaking about the nightlife. You know, I absolutely love my ward, and there's some fantastic places which we've been walking around. But when I think about where in Bromley do I go to kind of go and be with friends,
where's your
family?
Friends,
yeah, you know, going on Beckenham High Street with my friends, the George Inn in Beckenham, a couple of other places, Erin's, even the O'Neills and Bridge Bar and Patrick's, you know, going there with my friends, as I am tomorrow, and having a good laugh and a good catch up, you know, that's really nice. And to do it, say, so locally to home, and to do it in somewhere that feels safe and looks nice, you know. This is a really fantastic place to live. I'm really lucky to have been brought up here and raised here and managed to give something back here. Not a lot of people get to do that, so I realise I'm really lucky and really privileged to be able to be in this position.
So we spoke a bit about what you have achieved on the council.
Yeah.
We spoke about a bit of some of the things that are in the pipeline. Yeah, of course, we're about 18 months away after you.
Thank you.
We're about 18 months away from the election or so.
Yes.
You've put yourself forward for re-election, and
Absolutely.
hopefully, I certainly hope that you will be re-adopted
So do I.
as the Conservative candidate for the 2026 election. So what's a second term? What's in the pipeline for a second term of Councillor Josh Coldspring-White if the voters give you?
Well, obviously, I think the first thing is to go to voters and say we've done a lot and we have a good track record, but there's so much more to do and we're only just getting started. I think in a second term, I'd really like to focus on getting to know our businesses more, because actually we can invest so much more in this ward if we can bring the people together, and as a councillor you can do that. So I'd love to focus on maybe setting up a Chamber of Commerce or a business forum for the ward, or for Hayes at the very least, so we can bring people together. And when we come and find pots of money and grants where we need match funding, we can go and say, look, there's a fantastic opportunity to renovate a park, or do more with our high streets, or get more CCTV cameras around so people feel safer. If we can have access to that, then we've got, we're at the precipice of a really, really exciting opportunity where, as you've said, at a time when local government is facing difficulties, in Hayes and Coney Hall, we're on the up. We're getting more investment, we're getting more support, we're seeing promises made and promises kept. And that's a really exciting thing to be a part of. So, I have put my name forward. I really, really hope that next May people across this ward will give me the privilege to serve them again for a full 4-year term. And so much more to do, I can't wait to get started on the next 4 years.
So on the council, there's obviously been difficult decisions that have had to be made. There's been things that we really didn't want to happen. And obviously no one 100% ever agrees with everything. And the financial challenges facing councils, particularly outer London councils, does mean that someone is optimistic and wants to change the world in politics, like yourself, that must bring a pretty steep learning curve and everyone knows things move slowly in local government. There's procedures, correct procedures to stop corruption. But the wheels of local government do turn slowly. So how have you found that element against your optimistic personality?
I found it difficult at first, but I don't enjoy it, because these decisions aren't nice ones to take, but I get a sense of feeling like I'm doing my job well, because at the end of the day, as right back at the beginning, I said one of the reasons I'm a Conservative, because I believe in being responsible. I believe in being responsible with people's money. I believe in being responsible with our public services. I believe in having an attitude of being responsible when you're in these offices. And so, although a lot of these decisions are difficult and things that I didn't come into politics to do, they're the right ones. That it's right that we do that, because ultimately, my residents, when we're out on the doors, say to us, we don't want, one of the reasons we like living in Bromley is because it's not like Croydon, where Labour ended up putting it in so much debt and ended up, I think, coming to criminal trials in the end. That council taxes had to go up by 15%, commissioners went in, and statutory services were begun to be under threat. They've now got a fantastic Conservative mayor and council there that's cleaning up the mess that Labour left. But I don't want Bromley to be in that position, and so that's ultimately what I say to residents is I would not be doing my job properly if I was not taking the responsible decisions, because ultimately when these bad things do happen, even worse bad things like 12% council hike, it's not the rich and the privileged that are the ones that don't benefit from that. It's poor, vulnerable people, working class people, hard working people that are the ones who feel the brunt of those. And as someone who passionately believes in having good public services and having that support for people, I wouldn't be doing my job well enough and correctly if I didn't do everything I can to
So life came at you pretty fast on the council, because you weren't long elected. you were dealing with a particularly tricky piece of casework, I remember. I believe you got called a go-between gopher by one of our residents. I mean, we know that people often lose patience with politicians, and they sometimes see explanations as excuses.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is excuses, absolutely. But again, we talk about you. How was that particular experience?
Again, it's difficult, but as I say, if you're being responsible, you're being upfront and honest with people.
Yeah.
And as I say, I genuinely do believe my residents are good, decent, honest people who, speak sense and know what they're talking about when it comes to these things. So I tend to feel, we're not always going to get everything they want because of budgetary constraints or because of legislation. A lot of the times that we can't control because we're not in Parliament. But as long as you're straight up with people and give them a reason why, some people might be upset or a bit annoyed, but at the end of the day, that's what being a responsible person in public office does. And it's really important at a time when across the world there are politicians who promise the earth and deliver nothing, that we don't fall into that trap, that we be straight up and honest with people. And that means that when we do deliver, people can be confident that what we've delivered is robust and long term. Like the investments we've got in the water, so to keep bringing it back, but I just think it's a really good case study for how to do this in the 21st century.
So Josh, we've walked,
we have,
we've talked,
we have,
we've cried,
we've laughed.
Exactly. We've heard a lot about you.
Yeah.
Some might say too much about you.
I think lots of people would.
we found at the absurdly young age you started to show an interest in politics. You're probably going to be in a lot of trouble for daring to question your mother's recollection of that. But no, it's been very interesting to dive into some of the details of what keeps Councillor Coldspring-White going.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved it. Thank you for the opportunity, and best of luck with the rest of the series. It is really important to make sure that people across Bexley and Bromley are celebrated, because we live in a wonderful part of the world, and we need to make sure we're lifting people up. So best of luck with the rest of the series.
Thank you. That's it. That's my first walk and talk. Let's see if I keep doing them.